Yesterday we had a matchup with the Clippers and the Utah Jazz, and overall it was a surprisingly really good game. Like going into it, I didn't really know that Keontae George, Yusuf Nurkic, Ace Bailey, and Laurie were all going to be injured, and I was kind of expecting, when you hear those type of names, when you hear Laurie, when you hear Keontae George out, you kind of expect it to be a really bad game, and that's kind of what I was expecting too. Because even though the Clippers haven't had close to near what the type of season they've wanted. They've been on a five-game win streak, and Kawhi Leonard's been playing really, really, really good. As of recently, averaging like 35 plus points, 35 plus for the past like 5 or 6 games. So I wasn't expecting it to be too close, and at the start of it, it wasn't. At the start of it, it was like a 0 to 16 run by by the Clippers, but then eventually, as Utah's team was able to calm down a little bit, they're playing guys who are starting that's just not used to starting because again, you're missing your um, starting point guard, I think starting center, and then you're starting power forward. So it was just a little bit of an adjustment for this Jazz team, but it was a really good game. It was a really really good game. It took the Jazz a little while to really get it close, but by halftime, I think it was only a 3 point game. I think it was the Clippers leading by three, and then Utah actually they were really really pushing the pace and kind of putting some pressure on um, on LA for a little while. Like during that third quarter, they were really really being competitive with them, and then it stayed close throughout that fourth quarter. Like it was really really close, but then halfway through the fourth quarter, Kawhi Leonard started to do Kawhi Leonard things. I think he ended up scoring like 18 or 20 points in that fourth quarter. He ended up with 45 points. But yeah, overall this game was really good. It was just at the closing part of this game, um, Kawhi just took over, and Utah. Even though I think Utah actually had a pretty decent defensive game tonight, they just they just didn't have any type of response from. And to be fair, that's what most teams have had to deal with in this 5 game, which is now going to be a 6 game win streak for the LA Clippers. Is how do you slow down someone like Kawhi, who just he doesn't have too many weaknesses because now he even has a really really consistent 3 point shot. So it was it was a tough loss for Utah because they could have won this game, but at the same time, missing the type of people you're missing, I think you can come out of this game with a lot of positives. And I think one of the biggest positives are, someone like Cody Williams. Cody Williams, he's been kind of like a point of criticism for this Utah team for the past 2 teams. I don't remember how high he was drafted. I think he was somewhere in the lower part of the lottery. Maybe he was a little closer to the middle part, but it's not like he was a top five pick like Ace Bailey or anything. But there was a ton of criticism going his way because he just hasn't been able to look like he's an NBA ready player. And I think some people worried that maybe he came out of Colorado a little too soon. Maybe he just didn't have the type of experience that he needed to grow into his game. And what I talked about a lot on the live stream I was doing at this game is that it just takes some players the right timing and the right situation to find their comfortability. And this game, it looked like it. This game, he looked really, really comfortable. He ended up getting that first bucket of the game. I think he ended up having 18 total points on the night, but it wasn't just the points themselves that looked really, really positive for a player like Cody Williams. What looked so positive for him was that he was attacking. He was really, really attacking the basket, and he looked comfortable. He was making strong moves up against Kawhi. And I think a big part of why his game was so positive tonight is the matchups were not in his favor. He was not given any easy tasks offensively or defensively. Offensively, a lot of times it was Kawhi guarding him, and he's probably maybe he's not the best defender right now. Um, on on the Clippers, maybe you could say it's Chris Dunn, but he was seeing both of those players a lot this game. And then defensively, I saw him a lot of times on Kawhi Leonard too, and then he was also guarding James Harden a lot this game. And I think a big part of this game too is I like the defense he was playing against both. He had a big block against I think it was Kawhi. He might have had a block against Kawhi during the third quarter. And unfortunately, I don't know why they chose to do this personally, but they didn't really end up playing Cody Williams for most of that fourth quarter. Maybe they just wanted to trust some other guys like Slow Mo or or Sensabaugh more. And I understand Sensabaugh because Sensabaugh, he's doing his thing. But I think it's just a big positive that, in a game that you saw Cody Williams was going to get a lot of minutes, he performed well in those minutes. And hopefully it's a small sign that he can do a lot of positive things as the rest of the season goes on. And it's also another sign, be careful about giving up on players so early into their career. I think this is only his second year, so good signs from him. Another player I really, really liked for Utah this game was Sensabaugh. Now, Sensabaugh, I feel like it's going to translate super well for how much more competitive this Utah team is going to get, throughout their journey as like this kind of bad but not really bad team and developing into more like a play-in, playoff team consistently because he's got the ball handling and he's got the quickness to get past whatever defenders he was on. He had 20 points tonight, and he also had like a you'll see it a little bit later in this highlight reel, but he had this like 3 or 4 possession stretch where he scored on back to back to back to back possessions, and it was all off of drives. He was just getting into the lane, being aggressive, and I just feel like he was doing a really good job of filling in some of those offensive responsibilities that Keontae George and Larry would have. Another player who I really, really liked, their attacking and on the ball, and he did some good facilitating, was Isaiah Collier. Isaiah Collier, I think one of my criticisms of him in that Detroit matchup was that he just was a little too uncontrolled. Like he would get past people and then he might lose the ball in the lane, it gets turned over, or he might make a really bad pass. Like he had a bad behind the back pass that ended up going out of bounds during that game, and I thought that could have been really costly. They ended up winning it, so it didn't end up being too big of a problem. But today, I feel like, or yesterday, he did a really, really good job of controlling the ball and finding a lot of people, in spots that just an average passer wouldn't. And, similar to Sensabaugh, and I think he does it even better, is he has an insane first step. Like, I don't know too many people in the NBA who have a first step like him. I think of people like Cason Wallace, Darius Garland, like those two dudes, you see them, backing up away from the 3-point line and trying to get speed because they know within one step they can get past the defense. So it was really cool to see just how much that speed translated to this game because I was noticing it too during the Detroit game. And yeah, it just seems like something where Isaiah Collier, a big advantage he's gonna have throughout his career is he can just get past people within 1 to 2 steps. And I don't think it was super aggressive offensively, but I like that he was doing a combination of facilitating and scoring using that quickness and using that speed. So that was something that I really, really liked. And then, another player who I felt like, I don't know if he had less minutes than Cody Williams, but I feel like he was the other player for the Jazz who I kind of wish they had more minutes tonight, and that was Walter Clayton Jr. I think Walter Clayton Jr. was drafted this year somewhere around like the lower end of the lottery. I think I mentioned this before, but feels like a similar situation to the Dylan Harper, Carter Bryant thing and the Ace Bailey now and Walter Clayton, where you have your first round pick, but he's not as highly touted, so he doesn't get as many consistent minutes like a Ace Bailey or like a Dylan Harper. And he just played really, really good tonight. I think defensively, he was one of the biggest positives for this team. He's a really, really solid perimeter defender, and alongside Ace Bailey or alongside Cody Williams, I feel like these are two players that are going to be super important for this Jazz team as they improve because they're one of the few, very, very positive players defensively. And I just think he has all the tools to be, I haven't seen too much of his game, but for some reason the first person I was kind of thinking of was Davion Mitchell, where you're a little undersized, but you have really, really good lateral quickness to keep up with people, and you're just kind of like that bulldog type of player where you're really trying to keep up with people, and yeah, I just thought that was a really big positive for this Utah team. And yeah, just going into like some of the details too, like they kept it really, really, really competitive, and they didn't shoot well from 3 at all. Usually you see in this type of game where you wouldn't expect a player or you wouldn't expect a team to keep up with the other team, they have some type of freak scoring night, or there's some kind of crazy efficiency from players that you wouldn't expect. And it really wasn't that. Like, you did have players play better than you would have expected. Like, Cody Williams played better than you would have expected him to play tonight. And even Slow Mo had a 20 point per game night, or 22 point per game night, so he had an above average night. But it wasn't some freak performance or freak efficiency that kept Utah in this game. And it wasn't the 3 point line either. They shot like 20 something percent, 27. Like, they shot below 30% from three, and they were only out of the game um, when Kawhi Leonard ended up hitting a bunch of shots over and over and over again. And I think um, what's so good about this game is, the confidence that you get in being competitive with a team who should beat you on this given night. And even they should probably blow you out. Like this, I was expecting this to be a blowout game. It didn't end up being that way, and I think it just gives more faith to the Utah coach and a lot of these other Utah players that it's like, okay, it's not that we just have two guys who are really good and then everybody else is just really, really shaky. Like Sensabaugh, he looks like a legit scorer and player for this team. Isaiah Collier, I think some people had some questions about him being like a point guard for an NBA team because he's just not a um, traditional playmaker. He's more of like a playmaker off of his own athleticism, not necessarily off of his vision. He showed a lot of good vision tonight, though. So that's another thing that I think people might need to adjust in their heads, realizing that, early on into your NBA career, sometimes it's hard to have really good facilitating cues and moments and just that level of IQ because it's just a different speed, it's a different pace, and yeah, everything is just elevated to a different level than it was in college. And I think it's a good sign that this team has so many high level prospects on it that still really haven't blossomed into what they could expect because it means that this team has a much higher ceiling than you'd expect because Collier, he was a really highly touted player um, coming out of school and even out of USC too. So he could develop into a really good player for them too. Again, not every one of these guys is gonna average 20 points per game because that's just not how it works. You might get really lucky and have three guys, but right now they have two guys, one averaging 25, the other averaging 28, and I don't think you need to get greedy if you're Utah because your offense is already way better than you would expect it to be for this type of team because they're early in the process and they're not a playoff bound team this year. So I think there are a lot of positives. And like I was mentioning too before, a big positive for this team is that it already looks like they're starting to close in that defensive gap just a little bit. Early into the season, their defense did not look good. It looked really shaky. And it was like their offense is the only reason that they're in games, and their defense is the reason that they're losing games. So, especially in a matchup like LA, where they can kind of go back and forth with LA firepower wise, but defensively, they're so bad that eventually LA is going to win out because they have, a slightly better offense. Um, but yeah, tonight they showed a little different angle of that with Cody Williams playing really good defense on James Harden, Kawhi, and as a help defender, and then Walter Clayton Jr. playing just really good perimeter defense overall, guarding people like James Harden too. So I think this game, even though you come out with a loss, with the type of team that they are, being an 11 seed, maybe now they're down to a 12 seed, you got to be able to appreciate the good things that you can take away from every single game. Because this type of thing, like this type of positive performance for this team, will translate. And I know Will Hardy, maybe it's kind of like, it's tough that we ended up losing a game that we could have won, but at the same time, there's not much you can do when you have at one point a top three, top five player in the league play like he's a top three, top five player in the league. Because in the closing parts of this game, this version of Kawhi looked a lot like 2019 Kawhi, and there really wasn't anybody in the world who could slow down 2019 Kawhi, let alone a Utah team that's still trying to figure out their defensive identity. So a lot of good things to take away from this team, and yeah, I would just keep on paying attention to how this team is going because they have a really bright future, and I'm hoping that they make um, the right moves and the right decisions to keep this thing going. Because I think as long as you can maintain some